Hello, everybody. My name is Samantha Krenning, in case you haven't joined before. Welcome. Right now, we are going to talk about the opening scene of Battlestar Galactica. It's not even 5 minutes long, but man, does it pack a lot. I am so excited about this. Okay, so let's talk about it from an AI and robotics perspective. Okay, so I'm gonna have to say that the very opening part, when they're laying out the story, I just don't see it as being logically valid. Okay, so we start off with the first part of the premise. Humans made Cylons. Cool. First of all, that's robotics and AI way above what we have right now, and I'm in for it. I love it. Awesome. Okay, the second part, Cylons work for humans. Yeah, I totally buy this. I mean, we have so many different applications that we just really need robots for, disaster relief to helping take care of the elderly to, just driverless cars, decreasing human fatalities and all sorts of things, personalized healthcare. AI, robotics, machine learning, all of it can have such a huge impact, okay? And so, totally, I believe that we would create, robots and AI for a purpose that is, helpful to humanity. But then we get to their conclusion. The Cylons kill the humans. The Cylons attack, right? So I don't think one necessarily follows from another, and I'm going to talk about why. Because while this is a very interesting premise for a very cool sci-fi TV show, it really has some ramifications that follow us back to real life. Let's go through this argument one more time. So, humans made Cylons. Cylons work for humans. All right, I'm on board. I'm with you. I hear it. I totally agree. All right, but then so many other things have to happen in order for us to get to the Cylons attack humans part. Okay, I think of the next part like driving across the US. I've had to do this before. I've driven from LA to Atlanta. So imagine that you start off in metaphorical LA. You have the best of intentions. You start to build robots with AI to improve quality of life. The AI is pretty dumb. Not anything that anyone would consider sentient by any definition. The AI is somewhat like a flexible control system. You don't feel bad for using the control system on your thermostat, do you? Or your fridge? But then you start this very long journey. You think you're going to end up, in paradise, but you're actually on the road to, the metaphorical, humid, hellish summer in Atlanta. I lived there. And this is, the metaphorical place where your robots are waging war against you. We do not want to end up at that place. There are so many turns you could have taken that would have taken you away from the hellishness of Atlanta where, robots are killing you. You could have stopped in the desert of California. You could have turned off and gone up to Oregon or, or Washington. You could have stopped in Vegas and had a good time. You could have decided that life is better off without coffee and stayed in Utah. You could have taken a detour to see the mountains of Colorado and just never left. There are so many different paths that could be taken. And there's so many warning signs along the road, when you're driving and it's like, you're 500 miles from your destination. right? There's so many warning signs that say, you're getting closer and closer to Atlanta. You're getting closer and closer to, your robot's killing you. It's still 500 miles away, but are you sure you don't want to go somewhere else, right? It does not logically follow that just because we work on developing AI and machine learning and robots, that they will be violent. I actually think it's a great sign that so many people write sci-fi books that say, hey, an AI could become sentient someday, so we need to not be assholes to them, because that's not right. We wouldn't want to be treated like that, so let's not treat any sentient being like that. Cool, win one for empathy, I'm on board. What are some of these other metaphorical turns that could be taken? There's a lot of anthropomorphizing that goes on in sci-fi when we think about AI and robots. Maybe robots think differently. Maybe their assigned work is not a priority in the same way it is for us. I think that if they became sentient, it would be. I think that if they became sentient, it would be. But we at least need to consider the different parts of the argument that anthropomorphize or assume that robots will think and respond like humans. Humans are biochemically wired to be social, right? Not so with robots, right? So assuming that a sentient being who did not evolve the same way that humans did would be driven by the same things we are biologically driven by, and would be subject to things like, depression or anxiety or other maladies by not having the same thing that humans need, like that's a flaw. And that's a flaw in a fair amount of science, sci-fi, just in general. Right? Assuming that the robot would respond as a human would, or would have the same priorities as a human would, or would think, process information in the same way a human would. Okay, so a couple of these paths, like maybe AI never becomes sentient. I kind of hope it does, but maybe it never becomes sentient. That's one way to mostly avoid this. Cylons, maybe they wouldn't treat the concept of freedom the same way. I still would not be comfortable if there were a sentient being of... We get into some philosophical things here, but it's still important to realize the anthropomorphizing that goes on in this part of the in the argument. One part of our path to metaphorical Atlanta is that humans would have to deny the robots rights and freedoms. Maybe we don't have to do this if we have all this different sci-fi, if we have all these people who agree, hey, robot becomes sentient, treat the robot well, don't be an asshole. Maybe that's a way to avert this whole thing. Humans mistreat robots. This is one of those departure points where we don't have to mistreat them. It's not written in stone. All right, that's part of the lovely aspect. It's a lovely aspect of sci-fi that we can see issues coming and not do that. It's like if you're watching, a scary scene in a movie and there's somebody who's walking down into the creepy basement and the lights are off and you're like, no, don't do it. This is kind of one of those things. Don't mistreat the robots. Don't mistreat any sentient being. There's a big assumption that the robots would react to mistreatment as humans would. Would they? Would they? we are not the same. We are not the same, and to assume that a robot would respond the same way we would, that's a flaw in the argument. That's a definite flaw. Um, Cylons robots are just, they're not restricted in their actions by the same things that a human is, right? So we can't say that their possible list of actions is the same as humans, right? So uh, time is a different factor for robots, right? A robot, or a Cylon in this case, could steal ships and go far, far away in lots of different directions to solar systems not suitable for humans. They could travel for a long time, right? Something that's really too expensive for humans to do, not just in terms of cost, but in terms of, well, time. Humans would not want to send some sort of colony ship, like a multi-generational ship where people are living their whole lives on this ship, to go after a potential enemy that wants nothing to do with humanity. Like, that just, it wouldn't make sense. So, even if we got all these steps along the way, the Cylons are sentient, we've treated them terribly, they may not react the same way, right? And so it's a potential flaw in the argument there. So I don't think that it's necessary. I don't think it's 100% a logical conclusion to say you build AI and robots, well, they're going to kill you someday. No, I'm not on board with that. I'm not on board with that. Human appearance of the Cylons. Wow. Wow. This is incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult to make. I mean, this is so far ahead of where we are. I mean, we have some that are getting more and more human in appearance, but nothing to this extent. Just wow. It's not an accident to spend that many resources, that much time, that much research and development into coming up with different perfectly human in appearance robots. Like, that is not an accident at all. Seems like it's for infiltration. It's for information gathering, but it's more than that. So, that opening scene, spoilers, right? This diplomat who is thinking it's more of a vacation than a serious thing is sitting at this meeting point between humans and Cylons. And the Cylons for a long time just have never shown up. So he doesn't expect anything, but then two bodyguard type Cylons come in, and then this human looking Cylon comes in, and a lot of it's like a distraction, right? Because they don't want diplomacy, they don't want to talk, they want to destroy, and they end up destroying the other ship and this that whole meeting station in the opening scene, right? So why would you create perfectly humanoid looking robots? Well, yeah, infiltration seems like a good bet. I mean, but if it's just all about infiltration or like information gathering, maybe they just could have hacked in. I mean, these are very sophisticated AIs. Like, it would take so much time and energy, so many resources on the R&D side. Like, I don't know if I can make this point strongly enough to go into making these humanoid AIs, if they had redirected all of that effort to hacking, it probably would have been so much easier to get that information, right? So maybe it's not just for information gathering. And it doesn't seem to be about resources, but about wiping out humanity, and possibly like creating panic, fear, mistrust along the way. If people can't tell who's a Cylon and who's not, like who's human, who's an enemy, right? Creating this perfectly human appearance seems to have like a strongly implied psychological aspect to all of this. It's so much effort, time, resources, technology development, just enormous, just mind-boggling. They could have just blanketed a large part of space and, with dumber Cylons and just taken out their enemy, or use their resources to build their empire and spread out across the universe. There seems to be like a level of hatred and vindictiveness that goes along with this plot, like more than revenge, which makes me think, like, were they made too human? Anyway, there's a fair bit of anthropomorphizing just in the plot in general, but there's a level of vindictiveness definitely.
Are you alive?
Yes.
Prove it.
Okay, so in sci-fi, we can't help but create AI agents with human characteristics like curiosity and being plagued by, the questions of the universe. This is not the state of AI right now at all. At all. Like that would be cool, I think. Others may disagree. Others do disagree. I think it would be cool, but we are not there. And so I love that opening line of, like, are you alive? Very interesting.
It has begun.
So let's talk about human interaction for a minute. So if you have a robot that is indistinguishable from a human, you don't send that robot into a situation to distract one human for 1 minute so that the robot and the human get blown up. What? Like, the Cylons destroyed the whole station, including that room where the human and the Cylons were. There's maybe a level of sadism, is what it feels like wanting to see your enemy die. But there's also like a completely different view of death, maybe. Like, if the AI's consciousness really can awaken in a different physical body, then fear of the explosion won't be there. But still, it would take so much effort to build a human Cylon. It just seems like a tactical showboating waste. It's like only taking showers in a stream of like extremely expensive champagne, or buying a Lamborghini just to crush it into a cube in the junkyard. Like, maybe it's a way of saying like we're so resource rich that we just don't care. It just doesn't even enter into our priorities on the Cylon side. I don't know, but I thought it was interesting. And I also thought that the whole immediately using sexuality and distracting through attraction was an interesting thing um, to be like known and built in as a, you know, a common way for this robot Cylon who'd never seen another human before to immediately interact. Okay, so now there's one thing that I do want to talk about. So violent robots in TV, movies, books, um, it leads to anxiety toward robots and AI and machine learning in real life. And I find this really unfortunate. So one of the amazing things about sci-fi is it allows us to dream, right? To imagine if we had this technology, or if we had solved this problem of science, or, you know, if we had this thing, what could our civilization be like? What could our lives be like? You know, what does the future of humanity possibly look like? And I love all those questions, you know. And if you watch Star Trek or something like that, there's such a hope, at least in some of the older shows, about, wow, this is what humanity could be someday. This is what we could do. This is the type of progress we could make. This is how we could make lives better. And it's, you know, it's a very hopeful and optimistic frame of mind. And I love that. I love that part of sci-fi. I also like the part of identifying potential issues, saying, wow, if we have this technology, but we used it in this way, look at what could go wrong. Like, we need to not do this. It's like envisioning problems before they occur so that we can avoid them. And I love that. I really do. But as somebody who works in robotics and AI, I do a lot of machine learning. This aspect of violent robots in media has a real impact on people here, now, today, what they think of robots, what they think of machine learning, whether they're willing to have them in products or part of their life or helping them out in one way or another. And it's a little sad to me that sci-fi, which is this just amazing, hopeful, optimistic thing for me, can be used to have people look around in their everyday life now and actually be afraid of the future, be afraid of technology and all of these amazing advances that could, you know, change our lives for the better. So, very cool show, you know, interesting things about the premise. This is only the first, oh my goodness, less than 5 minutes of the show, but there's so much to say about it. So write in the comments, let me know what you think about the opening scene. Let me know what you think about sci-fi in general. I'd love to hear from you. Hit like, subscribe, notifications, all the YouTube things, and let me know what you think.